Very good. Thank you so much for this opportunity and for your gracious introduction. As you have rightly indicated, I'll be focusing on more of an update on what is going on in Ethiopia from my perspective. It will not be a comprehensive claim about Christian reflection, but I will try my best to reflect some points about what is going on specifically with a focus on hope and on giving some examples of what the church in Ethiopia is doing. Okay, let me go to yes. The objective of my presentation include just offer some Christian perspective on conflict in Ethiopia, specifically focusing on peace, reconciliation, and Christian response. And then highlight how the church can serve, or actually how the church is responding to the crisis as a prophetic, pastoral, and mediating presence in Ethiopia. And then finally, I would like to encourage our global Christian community to continue praying and collaborating with the Ethiopian church. I have, my presentation has 5 parts. I will start with a brief background about Ethiopia, and that will actually address the hope aspect of my presentation when we talk about crisis, but there is so much beyond crisis, and I'll try to highlight some of the features of Ethiopia, and then a few slides on recent conflicts in various parts of Ethiopia. And then I'll highlight some examples of Christian responses, specifically from the evangelical context. And finally, I'll try to give some insights, my own reflection of what is happening and what should be considered for future endeavors. And I'll conclude with a call for togetherness. Ethiopia is a country in the Horn of Africa, and we are located above the equator, and it's one of the largest countries in East Africa with a population of 134 million. That is as per Woldetsadik projection. And because with this number, Ethiopia is the second populous nation in Africa. And about half of the population are under the age of 18. So this is, in one sense, a young nation. It is a country of topographic contrast. It has both the highlands and the lowlands. It has rugged topography, and at the same time, extensive plateau flatlands, specifically in the central part of the country. And we have also active volcano in the eastern part of the country, where you could see the active magma boiling. That is in the eastern part of the country, where it is, the country has one of its lowest points, which is about 110 meters below sea level. This is also another feature of the country. The biggest river, Nile River, it has its biggest share from Ethiopia, and this, we call it Blue Nile in Ethiopian side, and this is, we call it what Abai Fall, but it is, we call it a river that smokes. Ethiopia has a feature of togetherness. One thing that can express Ethiopia is togetherness. Life is together in Ethiopia. This could appear contradictory with the conflict situation, but that is very, very true, despite spots of conflicts in different parts of the country. This is one of the points of togetherness. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church celebrating one of the holidays that is registered by the United Nations as a heritage. And this is called the Maskal celebration, and where you find all Orthodox followers coming out in an open air, just being together to celebrate. And that is one point of togetherness with religion. Again, we also have a big community, a Muslim community, nearly 1/3 of the total population. Again, they also have time of togetherness. And we have also a growing population of evangelical Christians. And this is an open air conference where evangelicals in Ethiopia and in Addis Ababa and surrounding come together to worship the Lord. When you see this, packed thousands and thousands of people coming together, that is actually life in Ethiopia. But beyond this public gathering, life is made, and life is being made together in Ethiopia. This is rural Ethiopia, and they are building a hut. And you can see everyone has a role. And community life in Ethiopia is pretty much shared. Things are done together. Building a house is a call of doing it together. And also harvesting is also a call that people do it together. This is another point of togetherness. Ethiopian market, you see people coming together, in another area coming together. And so this is, the country has, it's a country of togetherness. I know this is also another point of togetherness. I'm going to play a music, which is not a Christian music, but it shows the diversity of Ethiopian culture. So I want to play it, and it is not common for evangelical Christians to listen to this music. But I see in the context of talking about togetherness, music is also one of it. And the music that I'm going to play is not the whole of it.
We can't hear it.
Oh, sorry. If that is the case, maybe let me skip it without taking too much time, but let me say a few words. Probably it could be something technical, and maybe sharing, I didn't share it with video. So this is actually a music. Whenever we go to a wedding in Ethiopia, you find people singing different music from all over the country. And that is one point where you could sense the togetherness of the Ethiopians. I'm sorry for that. Let me go to the next slide without taking too much time. Ethiopia is also another sign of togetherness, specifically in relation to African independence. A number of our countries in Africa, they take Ethiopia as a pioneer, as a model of independence, because Ethiopia has never been colonized, but rather Ethiopia supported and encouraged many of our countries in Africa in their fight for independence. So you can see a number of African countries have the flag of Ethiopia, the color of Ethiopian flag in many ways. These two flags are, this was the first Ethiopian flag, and this recently we have added a star in it. But generally, you can see the color of Ethiopia. So when we think of Ethiopia, Ethiopia has also significance for African unity, and in one or the other way, it's a symbol of Africa, including the headquarters of Africa being in Addis. Ethiopia is also another aspect of has another aspect of togetherness. Ethiopian Airlines, that has been flying for the last 77 years, is now connecting the whole of Africa and Africa to the outside world. There are other sources of hope that are coming up. Recently, we have finalized the building of Great Renaissance Dam on the big river of Blue Nile. And this is the biggest dam in Africa and one of the biggest dam in the world as well. And this also signals another hope. Now, projects like this one are points where people come together with their resources, with their knowledge, with their experience, and also they have part in it. Recently, we also have a project by the government. It's called Green Legacy Initiative, and that is also covering the country with trees. And because of that movement, the country's coverage of forests is now grown to 23.6% in the last 6-7 years, from 17% in 2019. So these are some of the things. When we talk about crisis, yes, crisis is here and there, but there are also undeniable hopes. And I have mentioned a few of them. So when we pray, we also have this perspective in mind as well. Now let me go to the recent conflict. Despite all this magnificent feature of the country, unfortunately and sadly, we have also experiences of conflict in different parts of the country. Of course, they are more local and more regional than nationwide conflict, but they have been very, very devastating. Just if I mention some of the features of the conflict, I have these 3 points. These conflicts that are happening in different spots and different regions of the country have disturbed and eroded the togetherness in some sense. So they have played a very negative role against a long-seasoned and long-standing togetherness of Ethiopia. And in some sense, and sadly, it has also endangered a human life, including loss of life, displacement, mistreatment, and injury, and loss of livelihood. A number of other sad realities have also been experienced because of the conflict. And also damage of properties and infrastructures. As we know, conflict has its own cost, and very costly and unproductive cost. When this conflict happens, it didn't happen just suddenly, and different church leaders have their own voices, and they have sensed that it come in one or the other way. And in some sense, before the conflicts happen, or amidst of conflicts happening somewhere else, and then sensing that this would happen somewhere in another country, different church leaders uttered their voices. And let me read just one of this. This is by one of our senior leaders, evangelical leader in Ethiopia. Anger is showing its strength and ugly face in various ways. As a result, the lives of good, gentle, and kind people are being crushed. The bodies of many of our gentle and kind citizens are being crushed and beaten with sticks, stones, and other cruel hands. Many people are being uprooted from their birthplace and familiar surroundings and forced to migrate to unfamiliar locations. Words of humiliation and bitterness are being used against people that can destroy their lives makes their lives miserable, and turns them into beasts. This reflects the ugly nature of conflict that we have experienced in different parts of the country. This captures to some extent the realities of conflict in the country. This is from children. I asked how children describe conflict, and as a person who works with children, I always want to get the perspective of children. And children usually express their feelings in pictures than in words. And this child at 10 or 11 from one of the conflict areas drew this picture. And the picture in the left shows a child hidden under a bed because the surrounding was not safe, because there was open fighting, including modern arsenals and weapons. So when this child expresses conflict is about being limited self to remain under a bed, forgetting the reality of enjoying the outdoor, playing with friends. But the other side of it, the contrast is when things are okay, life is like playing with friends in an open air. And the picture on the right shows the exact opposite of conflict. So when we talk about conflict in Ethiopia, these are some of the realities. Another child, another girl drew this picture. And the left one is conflict. And you can see people are separated and crying. And there is somewhere here a flower dry. And that is actually what conflict means for this child. But on the other hand, hope is like when the family is together and the child is escorted to go to home, to go to school. That is actually going to school, and the parents are welcoming the child. And so conflict is actually disintegrating families. You find realities where children are unattended, hundreds and hundreds of them, when there is an open conflict in a community. This one is another one. So conflict, again, is the left side of it. When there is conflict, there is injury, there is bleeding, there is tears, and there is fighting. You can see the open fighting from here. But when things are okay, now peace is about playing in a football pitch, in a football field. And this captures the essence of conflict, the ugly nature of conflict, and children being robbed of the joy of friendship and the joy of play in the play field. Let me mention another pastor reflecting again on the situation. Sorry, I have a big text, but let me read it quickly. The country is wounded. Again, this was before some of the conflicts that happened in the northern part of the country. So in a way, this was also like a prophetic voice for the church and for all actors to be ready not to get into conflict. But unfortunately, it happened. But this pastor said, the country is wounded. There is ample evidence that society views reconciliation and forgiveness as a humiliation. Revenge is rampant. We label those who show a sincere desire for forgiveness and mercy as losers. Instead of being humble, we are attracted to haughtiness and arrogance. Social unrest has increased in number and scope. Political and cultural crises of many kinds and terrible in scale have proliferated. conflict and violence, misery and sorrow, discrimination and judgmentalism, hatred and bigotry have spread. There are many people who strive to correct evil with evil, hatred with hatred, wrong with wrong. Not only have they increased, but they have exposed people to fear and anxiety. There is a problem. That was the reflection by one of the pastors. He continues saying, there is a problem. And then unless we close our ears and say when we see nothing, we are surrounded by a terrible and shameful confrontation. So this captures what conflict is, how pastors see conflict in Ethiopia, and specifically how prophetic voices, I say them as prophetic voices because these words came before some of the conflicts, these devastating conflicts that we experienced specifically in the northern part of the country. For the interest of time, let me go to the next slide quickly. Now, when we see all these conflicts, what are the undergirding causes? Some of the points that I observed from what I see and from what I have read from some literatures, but most important from my own reflection, are one is unsettled issues carried forward. So the conflict today is not the product of today or the product of the present time. Some of the issues were postponed without being properly addressed, and unfortunately, when they get rotten and cause damage to the lives of human beings. The other fueling factor is destructive narratives, specifically with social media, with technology. There are very dangerous voices coming from every corner, from everyone, with different intentions. And unfortunately, that scatters dust of hatred that we cannot easily rub off. And the dust fueled the conflicts that the country experienced in different parts. There is also a tendency of uncivilized and inhuman confrontation. Disagreement is natural, but how you handle it, it happens in some parts in a very uncivilized and inhuman way, which is very, very costly. There is also thorny groupism, othering others, a question of including others, treating others as if others are subhumans or non-humans, and treating your own group differently. That has also played a very big role in fueling the conflict. And then finally, there is also a mentality that we win and lose. That the possibility, the thinking that we can gain together, we can win together, in some sense seems very, very far. So now, let me go to the third part. So how do Christians respond to this? I will take a few examples. It's not exhaustive by all measure. I will take an example from two churches and then an example of a Christian ministry and an individual, briefly. This is a response from Makanesus Church. Again, this church has a very vast operation in conflict resolution and peace building, but I have only picked one. And this is called a Mela model. Mela in Amharic means solution, but it is also an abbreviation. And the church is mobilizing and engaging local actors. And applying this approach, they have brought peace and reconciliation in one community in the northern part of the country. That has been long-standing conflict, people killing each other, displacement was there, and this church engaged. Actually, that is not even the area of the presence of this church, but they went there with this mission and they brought peace and reconciliation. So what I'm saying is, churches are trying their best to intervene in the situation. In their interventions, this church has three outcomes. They focus on restoration, and I think that go with the pastoral aspect of it, resumption, and then resilience. These are the areas that they want to achieve, and they have plenty of testimonies about the achievement of these outcomes in different parts of the country. I'm not claiming that I'm exhaustive about what they do, but I really like it. This model, this can actually be nurtured, can be watered, and can be strengthened to be applied in other parts of the country and by other churches and by other actors as well. Another church, again, this church is Messiah Christos Church. This church has also a well organized function on peace and reconciliation, and they focus on conflict prevention. Now, this is an advocacy and a prophetic aspect of it. So I like that one. Conflict happens before it happens. That is the whole issue of conflict prevention. You can actually abort it before it reaches a practical level. And they also build reconciliation and then peace building. Another model that I picked is also an initiative, a Christian ministry. It is called Abigail Peace Initiative. By the way, when I mention this example, in one or the other way, I have the opportunity to be part of some of the deliberations, the engagement, the discussions. And I'm very close with Abigail Peace Initiative. And this initiative actually was birthed as a result of the conflict. A person who came up with this vision actually came out of sleepless nights. He was not able to sleep for weeks, if not months. And then he called a few of us for consultation. And then we reflected on how Abigail behaved, intervened, and saved King David from crime, and then also saved her family from destruction. And then we picked that one as a name for the initiative. And the motto of this initiative is, everything can be done in peace, and everything can be done for peace and should be done for peace. Even disagreement can and should be for peace. They have, there are two books written by, again, by the person who initiated this initiative, but given to the initiative. And the thinking here is, conflict is all about how we value human beings. It is about how we see the value that we give to human beings. In some sense, you find people becoming just ethnic groups, becoming people in one language, and then color, age, all those things. And this book challenges those attitudes that the true value of a human being is actually human beings are made by God's image. So peace and reconciliation should start from the right understanding of human beings, who human beings are, and the understanding human words. There is also another book, The Role of an Individual. Again, although conflict happens at community level, as a group level, the role of individuals is very critical in averting conflict and in building peace. And at the same time, if that is ignored, things become just a question of mob, and group thinking, which is very dangerous, specifically eroding that sense of togetherness. This is a pastor, and I'm reading his book, but I really liked this book, and it is here with me. And again, this pastor also sees the problem like this is actually a question of being persons together. So the title of the book says, "Let's be persons together." Now these two books, the books that I mentioned earlier, and this one actually takes conflict at a deeper conceptual level. It is not a question of hand only. It's not a question of mouth. It is actually how our thinking is wired. And this is also another reflection. And I see that there are developments that the issue of conflict and again, peace and reconciliation should not be just taken superficially as a project or as an activity. It is about how we can help people develop the right attitude, the right understanding, the right view, so that it can guide their behavior. This is an NGO, a Christian NGO again, and this is an organization where I'm working in. And we have 4 models. And our response to this, the first one is in places of conflict, a priority should be given to actually take out a child from under a bed and help them experience open door and come to normal life. That includes providing food, clothing, shelter, and all those things. And we also do rehabilitation, restoring livelihoods, recovering of basic community services like school, health centers. In some places, there are a number of schools. There were a number of schools specifically in relation to the conflict in Tigray and the neighboring regions of Afar and Amhara, that schools were damaged. So we played our part to at least recover the basics of community services. And then the whole issue of building resilience and then seeing reconciliation more than an activity, but it's about building a healthy social fabric. And it is not just a project, it continues, it takes some time. Well, having said this, a few things, and then I'll conclude shortly. What I see from this as a reflection, one is conflict and response to it is complicated and complex. It should be appreciated. It is not just practical, it's also conceptual. It's cultural, and it has historical dimension. It has multiple players, individuals, groups, communities, and it has multifaceted effects: human beings, individuals, communal life, properties, infrastructure, environment, history, reputation, all those things. So when we think about conflict, we need to have that dearth of understanding. It is not just a fighting happening in a week or in a month, but it has this multifaceted features. And the implication is systematic response. It should include conceptual, practical, individual, communal, narratives, and actions. That is one of the reflections that I could draw from what we experience. Secondly, Christian response to conflict. From what I have seen so far, I am very thankful for what the church is doing, for what Christians are doing. But at the same time, I see these opportunities that need to be considered for better progress and better outcome. One of the features is because conflict happens in different communities, and then the efforts are more of reacting to the open conflicts that happen. in different parts. But what about the prophetic aspect of it? Can we actually save the future before conflict erupts? It's a question of how can we envision a future that is free of conflict, at least minimize conflict. There is a need to address the mind, the heart, and the mouth issue before things reach the level of the hand. Once things reach at the level of the hand, it is the effect is very debilitating. The second aspect that I observe is more of the responses are more of project type. I don't see it as part of the whole system of the church. It's more of just a project in some localities. I'm not against that, but the issue requires more of a systemic movement by the church. And the third one related to this is also somehow peace and reconciliation efforts are assigned tasks than being a movement of the church as a body. It's just a few professionals, a few trainers, a few leaders, and one function. As we see it, actually, it requires all of us. It is a way of the churches being, as these writers say. Reconciliation is not an action. It is a way of being. It is a life into which we are called, not something we achieve and then move on. I think that aspect, I see that aspect to be a gap. Another observation is also Christian response, again, for future consideration. It requires to be more of an orientation, reconciliation flowing as a gift to the world beyond as a response to incidents of conflicts. As Christians, as the church, God has blessed the church with peace. The peace of the Lord is with the church. And that should flow much earlier than instead of going there as a firefighter. So I see that takes more of an orientation than a project or intervention thinking. And the other one is ownership by the whole church. Again, I have mentioned it. It requires ownership and involvement of all the church as a body, not just delegated professionals or functions. And specifically in this sense, I want also to say that there are consultations, meetings, conferences, but they happen once in a while. But this issue requires continued and a bigger, a wider engagement of the church as a body. And then when we talk about conflict also, our efforts, response should also focus on not only on conflict areas, but non-conflict conditions are also calls for peace and reconciliation, because there are also latent conditions there, latent conflict. So before things erupt, that should be addressed. As the Bible says, reconciliation is a call for everyone, with one another, with the environment, with God. So a wider focus is needed. And finally, all have a part in peace building. So collaboration. I mean here, the local church, denominations, Ethiopians, non-Ethiopians, the church in Ethiopia, the church in Africa, and the global church. We need, peace is actually our common good given by our Lord, and then it requires collaboration. Let me conclude with this and a few things, one slide. This is, I like this quotation from a book written by Justin Welby. I write about peace building and reconciliation in the sense of seeking relationships at all levels of human life that are resilient enough to have disagreement without destruction, victory without triumphalism, concessions without degradation. A reconciliation is a long drawn-out process, extending sometimes over generations, which seeks to achieve that end. Peace is not found by avoiding conflict, but by disagreeing well. As a way forward, so as a body of Christ, it's and for the global church, our situation is actually a call to collaborate more in relief and rehabilitation work for communities that are affected by often conflict, like taking the child from under the bed to a playground. That speaks volume. And the narration of hope, despite various conflicts. As Christians, our hope is in the Lord, and we need to hold that hope despite multiple voices that disperse hatred, dusts of hatred, as I mentioned. And I also want to encourage our Christian brothers and sisters throughout the world and this call. As you pray, think also about the hope. And this dust should not cover the hope that we see. And then partnership at technical and professional level, and we also appreciate your continued prayer. Finally, this is a quote from Shifa Rao, again, a person who was behind the initiative of Abigail Initiative. And this is his vision that I totally share. And let me read this and I'll finish with this. Our country becomes a place where every relationship, be it verbal or otherwise, is in peace and for peace. Peace becomes warp and weft of the social relation of all peoples of the country. Peace is echoed by mountains, sung by the flora and fauna. The winds become the orchestra, and the birds its cheerers, and the sky the music conductor. Peace becomes the lingua franca of all corners, all peoples of the land of Ethiopia, in that it becomes the mother tongue of every child born in our land, worship language of the church and other faiths, undergirds of every development endeavor in the nation, public, private, NGO, and parachurch, and undergirding of music, arts, and performing arts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tsehai, for this wonderful presentation. And I can see only a black screen.
Okay, let me
stop sharing, please.
Should I stop sharing or keep sharing?
No, please stop sharing.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. That is great presentation, especially reflecting on our responsibility as a Christian and as the church. And one of the things which I remember in my previous job, I used to have 2 students from Tigray. And when the conflict started, I was very worried about my 2 students, and I didn't know how to contact them. After calling them several times and not responding, a few months later, one of them called, and this wonderful man on the phone started crying and telling me about the situation in Tigray, what happened. The Tigray situation conflicts started in 2020 and ended in 2022. And the peace agreement has not yet completed, and especially disarmament of those parties in the, I don't know whether I call them rebels or something, I don't, in Tigray. The things which, again, one of the things in OCMS, when we pray for the countries, we also notice that, and as an Iranian myself, I noticed that a conflict in one country does not mean it stay in one country. It spoils to different neighboring countries. For example, the Ethiopian conflict problem can easily, and also the Sudan conflict overlap to each other, and then the same thing in Eritrea, because Eritrea was very much influential in the conflict in Tigray as well. And then as Tsehai was talking about the hope, and the hope also linked to the water and that beautiful greenery of the Nile, and then also signs of the conflict in relation to the Egypt and the river Nile and all these things. However, despite of this conflict, what I really loved about your presentation, Tsihai, was you start with togetherness and hope. And in togetherness, we can achieve even the impossible one. And in the hope, that not only the hope in our togetherness, but also God's providence in our countries, and so beautiful natural resources in your country can also be a source of hope for the people. And the other source of hope in the country, as you flag it in relation to the togetherness, very much linked to religion and faith in God and the divine power there. Thank you. So I think in this time, I like to open that to 4 comments for questions, clarification, and we have lots of people on Zoom. Many of them are from the area, from your area, from Ethiopia and around the world. And I like, if they wanted to make also a comment, please do be brief in your comment or in your question. Also in our room, we have also Mark, who has half of the family. He has a family in Ethiopia and travels to Ethiopia quite often and is in touch with his Ethiopian family. He can also give us some comments in that regard. One of the, I like to start with my question first and then open it up to the floor in the room and also on the Zoom. People on the Zoom, please use the reaction button in the bottom of your computer to raise your hand, then I will call you to unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. Please do be brief. So one of my question is to Tsihai, when you talk about togetherness, you show those big crowd, mainly under the religious umbrella, togetherness, Protestant, Catholic, Muslims, and Orthodox. And what about togetherness in relation to tribal togetherness? And would the tribal togetherness also be another danger? Because if one tribe goes against the other tribe, or one person from one tribe goes against a person from another tribe, so then both tribes are in conflict and fighting. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, so that togetherness, I mentioned about the religious and market aspect of it, but it is a reality cross-cutting. You find Ethiopians married with each other and mixed with different ethnic groups. So that is the biggest reality. I have traveled from the top of the country to the other side of the country to places of different ethnic groups. And I sensed that togetherness, the innocence of the Ethiopian people throughout the different parts of the country. However, the danger of these conflicts is that there are voices and narratives to erode that togetherness, even in some sense claims that the clash is more of ethnic, and in some sense actually it also that narrative was also successful in some localities, mobilizing a few actors to stand against the other ethnic groups. But generally, the biggest reality is Ethiopians are related, interrelated, married, intermarried, and life, that togetherness, I claim, and from what I see, is the biggest part of the country. However, especially with the wrong narratives, there are efforts, there are voices, and there are also evidences here and there that reflect the sense of ethnic divide. And the whole intention of calling the church is actually, there is something that the church should safeguard and should continue maintaining that spirit of unity. So that is my observation, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Anyone wanted, Mark, do you want to? Yes, please.
Yes, I don't want to cut other people off, so I'll be brief. Tsai, thank you very much. Wonderful presentation, and good to hear from you again. As I was listening to you, I was remembering a little book that you probably remember as well, that Daystar wrote, entitled, in fact, Hope for Ethiopia. He wrote it a few years ago, really a response to your Prime Minister's project of ethnic federalism and a Christian response to that. And why I was reminded of that was that you started your presentation by talking about togetherness, a very positive way to start. And then you later on, you talked about individual responsibility in thinking about things rather than groupthink. And so there needs to be that balance between togetherness and individual responsibility. And that things always tend to take me into thinking theology, but it took me to think about the Trinity, because in the Trinity we have that real sense of togetherness, but there is individuality there as well. And it's out of that conversation between the three persons of the Trinity that we have the glory of God that we have. And so I'm just wondering how, I don't want you to get too political, but how you feel about the project of ethnic federalism, and how you maintain this sort of individual responsibility to think clearly about one's own situation and get into positive conversations. And perhaps if I can just ride on the back of that, one other question really. What responsibility does the church have for, or do religious bodies have for some of the problems in Ethiopia? I'm conscious that throughout the history of Ethiopia, Muslims and Christians have coexisted quite peacefully, but there have been real stresses when external Christian mission has come in, particularly with the Portuguese in the south, with the bringing in the Catholic Church, real conflict then. And I sense a bit of conflict with the Orthodox Church at the moment over, which we thank God for, but over the rapid growth of evangelicalism within the country. And is there any components that we have to put up our hands for as Christians and say we're contributing to conflict?
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you, and a number of questions. I'll try to offer my reflections. Some of the areas could be beyond my scope of understanding. Firstly, when I talk about togetherness, it is a togetherness of life. So that togetherness is built by the life of all the individuals. Yes, there is in some sense that individuals are denied of their individuality, and the emphasis is just the singing is about the whole area of being together, which is not a Christian way. Each and every person is known individually, and that is my understanding. And when I talk about togetherness, that individual identity is respected, but individual identity is not the whole of it. The essence is actually, it goes with what I reflected in my research. It is possible to be together and to co-become without putting others down. We can flourish together. So that togetherness, it recognizes individuals with life, with holistic nature, but at the same time, no one will be complete without considering others. So that is how I see it in that sense. And then individuals have very critical big role. I mentioned somewhere in my slide, like thorny groupism. Now, a few individuals coming together and then they end up being thorny for others, which is against the healthy togetherness. So at all levels, there has to be that welcoming spirit. Now, coming to how the country is organized, yes, that is the system, the government system. But generally, when you see the people, you have every people from different backgrounds in different parts of the country. It is, my assessment is the country is more mixed than you could imagine, as if, you know, administrative wise, that could be one of seeing it, which I also don't agree with that one, but that is now what the government does. But my thinking is, despite that system, there is natural beingness of Ethiopians together in one or the other way, and that was built through time. That is my point. When it comes to the church, yes, the churches play a big role, but the first thing is actually religious organization generally is how do they come together? Can they need to build trust with one another. And again, that is also, that boils down to the level of acknowledging an individual, a freedom to make a decision by themselves. It's you know, membership, followership should be given to the individuals as they decide. And that needs higher level conversation at religious level. So reconciliation and then more collaboration between themselves is the first step. And secondly, they can also serve the community, because in one or the other, you have people from different religious backgrounds. They are there, they live together, they share everything what they do regardless of their religious background. I think religious leaders need to build what is already existing in the community. And then we need to be cautious about sending signal that are making others, that otherness attitude or othering others should be avoided. Yes, there are conversations, you know, here and there, but nowadays I see some possibilities for conversation and openness. So the evangelicals, the Orthodox Christians, there is a need, a great opportunity for more dialogue, for more discussion and coming together. So that is what I can say. I know there are good intentions, leaders from both sides who want to do more of that, but there is a long way to go in that aspect. Having said all this, any difference should not lead us to conflict. That is actually what I believe, and that should be what religious leaders need to promote.
Thank you so much. There is a question on the chat before I ask Winnie to come in. And the question is from Fisha. Fisha, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can read it. A noisy place, maybe.
Yes, Fisha, say hi. Fisha is asking you, how do you see the role of teaching sound doctrine and becoming true disciple of Jesus, which surpassing moral values? I'm sure Fisha is also asking in relation to what the situation in Ethiopia.
Yes, yeah, so peace and reconciliation is not a question of moral value only. Primarily, it is a question of being, a question of nature. In the Bible, it says, Christ has come to reconcile us with God and with each other. There is no one that does not need reconciliation in this world. And as it's written in, I think in Colossians. So when the points that I have mentioned, they are elements of being disciple. A true disciple is a living instrument of peace. A true disciple is a person that flows, that makes peace flows to others, because we are peace givers. The Bible says, when you go there, give peace, and then they can receive it. So I see it that way. And then that is an area that the church needs to focus on when we think about peace and reconciliation. It is inherently what the church does within, but it should not be limited within. I think discipleship is not only happening in the church compound and with what the church does. It is about genuine interaction and communication with the community and facing realities that is happening in the community with the truth of the word. So I totally agree with that one. And I hope what I have said is not only, didn't signal as if it is just moral. It goes beyond moral. It is about nature. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sia. And now Winnie, after Winnie, Addis. Yes, Winnie.
Yes. Sneha, thank you so much for your lecture. It's very helpful for me to understand more about Ethiopia. And also your word of life is together is a very, I can relate it to the collectivism or the communal factors in Japan. But I mean, togetherness sometimes, of course, is very powerful in one sense, but it's also very toxic in another sense. So like in World War II, why the Japanese army commit such a brutal way of treating the people, one of the studies shown that is because of their collectivism, and also to get seasoned with the hierarchies of thinking that they can't resist what the boss or the superior, the general was at. And because of the togetherness of collectivism, individuals just take up small responsibility of the crime. So in this case, in your case, in your the conflicts in Ethiopia, so you explain that the causes of conflicts can be like the destructive narrative, like the scattered dust of the hatred in the social media, and also the groupism. So it's for me, it's like the war crime committed by the Japanese army is only from the individuals. They are just bearing very small responsibilities, so it's not bad for them. And in your conclusion, you said the need to address the mind and heart and mouth issues before it comes to hand, the action. So how do you, could you unpack it more, how for this conceptual transformation, put it into action, particularly if you have an experience or from your narratives, or maybe because of the win-lose mentality is an issue for them. So how this win-lose mentality transform so it helps to resolve the conflict.
Yeah. Thank you very much. A number of questions. Probably I might have not caught all of them, but let me try. Let me start from what you have indicated. The whole issue of conceptual transformation. When you go out and facilitate reconciliation between communities, that is like dealing with, is coming after the fact, because damage has already happened, and then the injury, individuals are affected. So it is like arriving very late with the solution. But my thinking is action actually starts in human beings thinking. Before they throw stone, they think about throwing stone. Before they scatter that thorny, dusty words or narratives, they have something in mind. So the whole issue of transformation, as the Bible says, is very, very foundational. That is why I am saying that the discourse of conflict resolution and peace and reconciliation should take should get deeper into the being of a person. That is, a person is a mind, a person has a spirit. So treating that source, treating the heart before it reaches the hand will be very, very foundational. This book has helped me a lot, and I encourage my Ethiopian friends. This is written in Amharic, and it actually addresses the heart issue. And the same thing with, I have a number of other books. But generally, how do we do that? I think it has to take the teaching of the church, the curriculum of the church, even taking it to the school curriculum, what that makes children and students, and then the education system, taking it to cultural interactions, and taking it even beyond the religious arena. That is where the prophetic role of the church comes. So this is what I could see to be an opportunity, and I sense the direction is being taken, because 2 books in Abigail, as an example, this one, and now a number of researchers are interested to look into deeper issues than just treating the wound of conflicts. I'm not sure whether I have addressed all the points that my sister raised.
Thank you. Can I ask Addis, please do unmute yourself and because I saw in the chat you made a comment in relation to the 4 R's. Could please unmute yourself, Addis.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Congratulations, again, and well done on the presentation. I think the problem is very deeper, as you have already said, and it requires a total confession of our sins, because a lot of empirical research and technical and professional support is already there. Recently, we have a master's program in peace and sustainable development as Ethiopian Graduate School of Theology to respond to the church's gap in responding to peace and long-standing conflict in this country. And we still see that the Christian community is not deeply confessing our wrongdoings, particularly in justice and righteousness, because development is being destroyed totally due to lack of peace, which is a result of resentment on lack of justice and righteousness in the lives of church leaders, in the lives of politicians and elites. Really, I love to see more of really a call for confession in the religious circle, particularly in the evangelical circle and in this country with the Orthodox congregations. Otherwise, all these tools are there already for us in many ways. But really, where is the call in your 4R solutions or model, particularly on the restoration aspect? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Addis, and good to see you too. Good to hear your voice. And
Thanks.
I know Addis is doing a number of things, and we are so grateful and thankful for that. It's definitely the issue of dichotomization, specifically practiced among the evangelical Christians, need to be addressed. And the essence of what I say is Christians should be engaged in that conversation. We cannot be just selective and say we are not in this. Conflict is the problem of others. In one or the other way, we have a part in that. And by the way, the church has never been an exception when conflict comes. The conflict in Tigray, everyone was affected regardless of their faith affiliation. So that's why I'm advocating the holistic engagement of the church. In our 4R, actually we see a reconciliation. A reconciliation goes beyond even justice. Justice is just compensating the damage that has happened. A reconciliation is much broader and more sustainable. And it is part of that. And reconciliation and peace building as bringing more sustainable solutions. So our the fourth R, reconciliation, has that essence of sustainability, even going beyond justice. Some of the discourses stop at justice, but not all damages could be compensated. You cannot raise a child who's already killed by conflicts. The only thing is you forgive and continue a better life with a better relationship. So reconciliation has actually those elements, I'd say. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you so much. And one of the things, before I ask Jama, our dean, to come in and ask his question or comment, I wanted to mention one thing to Tsehaywota, perhaps maybe if we don't have time today reflect on that, maybe later. When I did a lecture a few years ago on understanding reconciliation from interfaith dialogue, one thing which I noticed that the word or concept as it is, we have it in English in regard to the reconciliation. We do not have it, for example, in Islamic literature or in Islamic country. And then if we do not have the concept or something which reconciliation is very much a Western driven in relation to a kind of prolonged issues and needs lots of phases or these things. I noticed that, and even when I wanted to compare that with the Islamic understanding, and I noticed I can't find anything. And even there is a word similar to that, but again, it's very much linked to a marriage understanding rather than a kind of country or political understanding. That is one of the reasons I found it, okay, how can we use this word reconciliation in a context of, let's say, Ethiopia or different contexts that do not exist, the same understanding of reconciliation or the same concept you are using about reconciliation. And that is also still is my challenge. I have no answer to that. I leave that, and then that is why I'm calling now Chama to come in.
Thank you so much for this, and I agree, I think, starting from what you were saying, and before I make a comment, thank you so much for engaging in your work, which I've not seen at all in much of the scholarship, the child approaches to the conflict. I think that is so beautiful, especially looking at the pictures. The children are often not engaged in terms of how they understand and experience conflict. So I appreciate so much that you did that. We need to do a lot more of child anthropology and conflict in our research. Thank you. And picking it up on from Sarah, I think I think your concepts need to be engaged and defined. Even the very idea of togetherness. I think your sister was raising a question here about it. In terms of how you interact with these concepts in the English language, they often don't depict what you mean when you are talking about it within the context where you are. Especially because Africa has been said it's a place of blessing and curses, pluralism. In Japan is much more of homogeneity in terms of its interaction. So how you engage these concepts is also important. But there's something that I find interesting about the beginning of your talk. I read a paper, Beyond the Equator, There Is No Sin, looking at how post-colonial African countries are so deeply entrenched in conflict. One after the other, they've been this. But Ethiopia, which you also argued with the concept of Ethiopianism, the return to Ethiopia, is one of the only countries in Africa, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, that was not colonized. So the ideas, the theories around the conflict, most of them in Sub-Sahara, they move around the notions of coloniality, of conflict. How colonization is a key motif of engaging and understanding the conflict. But what you have said today made me start thinking or rethinking. Could it be that a place like Ethiopia that was not colonized and yet is deeply entrenched in the conflict is itself a form of critiquing the idea that much of the conflict in Africa is a result of colonization? Or maybe the problem that I'm having in what you said, when you say that it's wired into that, is it possible that what you are treading on is a very dangerous path where people could interpret it that conflict is something inherent to what it means to be African, which is a problem within historical understanding of an African person into that context, which I find dangerous in terms of that. If we read in people like Catherine Malabu, the argument about neural pathways, that people are wired to think in a particular way. I'm also wondering how you can push that discourse a little bit much more deeper to engage it from plasticity and the fact that actually people are always evolving. And conflict at its very fundamental level, it's a human problem rather than a racial category to engage into this. I'm not saying that you should engage this, but I'm just throwing this back to you. Even the idea of ecumenical approach in terms of the conflict. I know that the bits and pieces that you have raised. The Mekane Yesusu has been deeply conflicted in terms of racial tension. So I appreciate also you bringing in the idea of holistic engagement with the notions of conflict in Africa. But I'm leaving you with this. Is it possible that structural, systematic, and even symbolic dimension, which you have not engaged in your research, that the conflict, in fact, begin way before the consequences of the actual violence? Yeah. And how do we deal with that, rather than dealing with the symptoms, which is the actual elements that we are confessing over? Perhaps we are too late in our repentance into this process as a church, because the conflict could have taken place years before we see all the manifestations of it. Probably need new theories of understanding this. So I leave on to that, and I don't expect you to respond to all that mentioned stuff.
Wow.
And we have only 4 minutes left. Please do respond to Chama if
thank you.
If not, just as he mentioned, something to ponder and something to think and for the future.
Yes, many of them are actually food for thought, for consideration in the future. Thank you very much, Dr. Chama, for raising those questions. A few things. I think my belief is that conflict cannot be Africanized or Europeanized. It is actually human nature. As a Christian, I believe that this is a consequence of fall, and all human beings are included in that. And the hope in Christ's redemption can also take away that nature. But because redemption and salvation is a process, we still pass through that conflict. So the problem, I don't think the problem can be localized. It is African problem. I think I don't agree with that one. Conflict is inherently nature, but because of media, because of exposure, some of our problems are spoken more than the problems of others, and that is that's why some of our problems are more pronounced than others. But generally, conflict should be treated as Christians. And as you have said, that is actually, I will do more reading and more research, but my thinking is the seed of conflict happens way before a hand is raised or you throw a word. And as you have said, I will continue engaging with literature and see how it goes. But I totally agree with that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Please do join me and say thank you.
Thank you so much.
There are few comments on the chat, people on the Zoom. Please do read them, and people here, I left them there for you also to read them. One more thing, I just want, before leaving, I wanted you to engage, because what Mark said, just think about it, because I have also been thinking about it, whether our understanding of individualism and personhood is very different than the Western understanding of individualism and personhood, because I notice it is different in our country. In that also will help us to understand our togetherness. Thank you so much with that, and please do come next week, because next week we have another topic called Hoping Against All Hope, a reflection on the past, present, and future of Democratic Republic of Congo. That will be another fascinating topic. Please do come back and learn more about it, so we can compare what we hear today and what we are going to hear next week together, and to see how these conflicts are connected and togetherness are connected together. Thank you, and God bless all of you here and in this room.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I just close and say that tomorrow there isn't a student seminar, but there is a student forum. So all the PhD students are invited to come along to that and to have their say, to find out